Okay, welcome to video number 37 of the Diaries of a Coronavirologist YouTube channel. Today is the 14th of October, and we are up to a little bit over 38 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 around the world, and a little bit over 1 million confirmed deaths. So I've been away for a couple of weeks. I think it's been 3 weeks since I posted my last video. I didn't get COVID or anything like that. I was just having a little break from recording the videos. So apologies to the people who watch them regularly. I'm back now. I've got various ideas for future videos, so I should be back on a regular schedule. I just need a little break from doing them, so let's call this season 2 or something like that. Just going to do a quick video today. Main topic I'm going to be talking about is the treatments that Trump received. President Trump has, I'm sure everyone is aware, contracted COVID a couple of weeks ago and received various treatments for it and seemingly is cured and back in the campaign trail. So I just wanted to talk about those treatments a little bit. And also news from the lab is we got our paper published today that I think I've talked about on the channel before, but it went up in its final proofed peer-reviewed version today at the Journal of Virology. So I'll put a link down to that below in the description for anyone who wants to read it. It is open access, so anyone can get it. You don't need to be at a university. Like I say, I think I talked about that on the channel before, but it's just a little recap of what we did in that paper. So in the lab previously, they had, before I joined, screened various FDA-approved drugs to see which ones could inhibit either SARS-1 or MERS infection of cells in a lab, and found various drugs that were capable of inhibiting those two viruses. So when SARS-2 came, we went and we picked out all of those chemicals, screened them to see which ones were capable of inhibiting SARS-2 as well as SARS-1 and MERS, to find hopefully broad spectrum or broad anti-coronavirus drugs. And then we showed that various ones work, cause good inhibition of viral replication. And we used SARS-1 infection of mice to look at two of them. So we looked at chlorpromazine and chloroquine, because obviously that was making the news when we were doing this work. And what we showed there is that neither of those two drugs are capable of inhibiting the ability of the virus to replicate in the mouse lungs, but they do seem to protect mice from severe disease and signs of disease. So mice lose weight when they're infected with SARS-1. Treatment with the drugs protected them from that, and their lung histology wasn't as severe, suggesting they were doing something to impact the course of disease, but they weren't directly targeting the virus. So we've got that paper out now. People can go and have a look at it, and if you want any more description or have any questions about it, please feel free to drop them down in the comments, and I'll do my best to respond. So the main thing I wanted to talk about tonight was the treatment that President Trump received when he was diagnosed with COVID. Obviously, I'm a little bit behind the times. He's now over it. I probably should have done the video last week, but I still thought I would talk about it a little bit today. So he received supplemental oxygen, apparently. So it was suggestive that it was a fairly severe case. His blood oxygen levels dropped enough that he had to receive supplemental oxygen. But in terms of the treatments, or the more direct-acting antiviral, let's say, treatments he received were remdesivir and Regeneron's monoclonal antibody cocktail. So I've talked about both of these things on the channel before, and I'll put a link down to both of the videos in the description for this one, so you can go back and check out those videos if you are inclined to find more detail. But to just do the quick version here, remdesivir works to inhibit the virus by blocking the ability of a viral protein to copy the viral genome. So obviously when a virus infects a cell, it makes more of itself, and then those new viruses go off and infect new cells, and that's how it spreads. So remdesivir blocks the ability to copy the viral genome. So this is a very good way to directly target the virus and to try and have very minimal side effects, because it's not targeting something innate to a human, it's targeting the virus. So that's a good one to use to block viral replication at the early stages. And it probably needs to be given early, because that's when the virus is actively replicating. That may be at times before there's real overt symptoms, because a lot of the symptoms are to do with the immune system, but it's a good way to dampen down viral replication and try and bring things under control. Now, Regeneron's antibody cocktail is two antibodies, and I talked about these in my last video, that target the spike protein of the virus. So very similar to what we're trying to do with a vaccine, producing antibodies that target the spike protein and block the ability of the virus to infect cells, Regeneron are just skipping the vaccine bit and taking antibodies that we know target the spike to block infection of cells. So again, this is a great way to target the virus, have minimal side effects, and it's quite a nice complement to remdesivir. So in principle, what may happen is that giving someone like Trump the Regeneron cocktail and remdesivir targets the virus at two different parts. So the antibodies are going to try and block the ability of viruses to get into a cell. And then if any viruses avoid that and manage to get into a cell, remdesivir is then capable of blocking the ability of those viruses to replicate and produce more. If they manage to get around that and produce more themselves, then you've got the antibodies to try and stop the whole process repeating and so on and so forth. So it's not a combo that's been actively looked at. I don't think there's any clinical trials for the two of these together, but it kind of makes sense to use them together if you really want to target the virus and bring replication down. And if you're not following the clinical trials and trying to do everything you can to protect the president. So those treatments to me seem to make sense. What was a little bit more confusing, though, was the fact that he was also given dexamethasone. So dexamethasone is a corticosteroid, and its functions, or its role, is to dampen down the immune system. So it's an immunosuppressive drug, in essence. That's been shown in a few studies to help with the outcome of severe COVID infections in patients. So patients with severe COVID have been given dexamethasone, and it's been shown in a couple of studies to help the outcome. So people given the treatment don't die and recover better than people not given it. Now, that's because at that stage when the disease is so severe, it's largely down to the immune system causing the problems, not so much about the viral replication. So if you can dampen down that overactive immune system that's causing the damage, then potentially you can improve the outcome of the patient. So makes sense in principle, but it's a hard one to time for when it's best to give, because you need the immune system at the start when the virus is first infecting, because that will limit the amount of viral replication, which can cause damage in of itself, but it's also beneficial later on. So there's kind of an idea that in the first week or so of infection, that's when you want to be treating with antivirals like remdesivir and the monoclonal antibodies from Regeneron. And then in the second week or longer or further on, if symptoms get more severe, then treatment with steroids like dexamethasone is going to be a potential treatment. So using those three kind of makes sense, but they seemed, from what little information was given, to all be used very quickly and around the same time. I think I read that he went onto the remdesivir on Friday, or Regeneron's antibody on the Friday, remdesivir on the Saturday, and I was reading about dexamethasone being given on Sunday. So that was a bit odd and seemed like a strange course of treatment. Obviously, the doctors know more, and there's information we haven't been given about the treatments that he received. But it seems like an odd combination and kind of a bit of a sledgehammer almost. Let's just throw everything that might have a beneficial impact in the hopes it works. And it did. So our case of one is interesting in that Trump, who has many of the risk factors, being elderly, being somewhat, let's say, overweight, be polite, and possibly having other underlying health conditions, survived. He had all the risk factors, many of the risk factors for getting the most severe case of COVID and potentially dying, and the treatments he received seemed to have allowed him to be cured of the virus. I'm not going to go into all of the things about whether he's still contagious and all that sort of stuff, but the treatment seemed to work. I just thought I'd break down in a bit of detail what the treatments were. I think it's a bit of an odd combination that he received the dexamethasone so close to also receiving the others, just because of the way the different actions they have. So just as a recap, you want to be targeting the virus early on to try and limit its ability to replicate and trigger this hyperactive immune response. But then if you get the hyperactive immune response, that can cause the severe damage, and you want to dampen that down with things like dexamethasone. So in principle, the treatments, those 3 treatments could be useful. Just seemed like an odd timing with which he received it all. So just in case there's any confusion, not everyone is the President of the United States. I just want to make that very clear. I'm sure many people might want to be, although then again, maybe not, just in the times we live in. But my point there is that this treatment has worked for Trump, seemingly. It seems to have cured him. He seems fine. He's come out on the other side. But I don't think this is a panacea. I don't think we're going to see remdesivir and Regeneron's antibody cocktail combined, and that's going to be the standard of treatment for everyone who gets COVID. It's just not possible to do, to be honest. So I think Regeneron have come out to say that if they're given the emergency use authorization by the FDA for their antibody cocktail, they'll be able to produce 50,000 doses. Right now in America, each day we're getting 50,000 new cases. So that doesn't go very far for treatment. Remdesivir is similarly in short supply. So that's not going to be broadly available and broadly applicable. Timing is also going to be an issue. As I've stressed throughout this video, those treatments are targeting the virus. You want them early on in the course of infection. With Trump, he has access to testing every day if he wants to take it. So they can catch his infection right at the early stages when those therapies are going to be most useful and effective. Not everyone and most people aren't going to be tested regularly, let alone have the option to be tested every day. So catching an infection early is much harder. That's not to say those treatments won't work and won't be effective, but it becomes a bit harder. Dexamethasone, however, may be a good one to have, and the trials are ongoing to look at it, because that's potentially the one that can bring people back from the brink of the most severe disease when it's the immune system that's causing the damage, because you're dampening down the immune system with this steroidal drug. But as I say, this has worked for Trump. It's not going to be broadly available for everyone. It's not our new form of treatment. But it's great to see things are working. And it's more good news in our hunt for treatments for tackling SARS-2, the virus, and dealing with COVID-19, the disease. And that's all I've got to say for tonight. So that was just a quick little run through of the video to ease me back into it. And I'm going to get back to doing these more frequently, going back to my regular schedule of once a week. If you found the video useful and interesting, please drop a like for the YouTube metrics. And if you've got any questions and comments, please leave them down below and I'll do my best to respond to them. And if you've got suggestions for new videos and topics you want me to discuss, please leave them down below. I'm happy to take input. If you're new around here, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can get the updates when I put the new videos up. And as always, please stay safe, wash your hands even. I haven't said this for a while. Stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask, and keep calm and carry on. We will get through this pandemic.